Neighbor thinks he owns the neighborhood and refuses to listen. For some background, this is a story from years ago when I worked on site in a tech company in a small market all over America. The work is good and pays pretty well, but the traveling can be quite hard as I put in well over 100,000 miles a year by car because that is my main source of transport most of the summer. I'm currently 36 years old, turning 37 in December, and my wife is 34 turning 35 in January. Our entitled neighbors decided to act like jerks and let their dog run loose in our yard again, said that their dog has every right to walk wherever he wants and that we shouldn't complain just because he's digging up our garden. On top of that, they even park their car in our driveway multiple times. While we're all away, we hire very good companies to water the lawns, feed the cats, and take the whole family on road trips. Our kids get to see a lot of America, as well as parts of Canada and Mexico, and we have wonderful vacations. I get to travel and spend time with my family after work. These trips typically last 3 to 4 months, and they are truly wonderful times. I have to spend time away from home alone for 2 weeks to 4 months throughout the winter months since the kids attend school. In the summer, this happens also because family members have to fly back to their hometown for other obligations, but occasionally they accompany me on Christmas break, which once again, is a fantastic time. At least while I work this job, my wife doesn't have to work. This specific encounter occurs at a period when I'm out of town and my lovely wife is taking care of things at home. We have a wonderful family that lives across the street from us. They are truly terrific neighbors and have been since we came into this property. The owners of the bar are upper middle class Latinos who have made some very lovely improvements to their home, such as constructing an iron fence around their backyard. They even own more beautiful vehicles than they can fit in their driveway that look stunning the way they are. There are 2 cars that are always parked on the street in front of their home, but they also have a problem because, for whatever reason, someone in the neighborhood cannot accept that a Latino bar owner can make this kind of money without also dealing with illegal substances. Every month, the police raid their home and cars using fine-tooth combs and warrants, and they always leave empty-handed with no fines, no tickets, and no infractions whatsoever. They usually approach us to express how sorry they are for any inconvenience caused in any sort of way. We tell them that this says more about the police than them and there is no need to worry about it as it can happen to anyone, and they appreciate our support. And since my wife and children are also Latino, we are glad to give it to them finally. They've had enough of the injustice and the people nearby, so they sold the house and the bar and moved to a smaller town in another state with a larger Latino population. They opened a new bar there, and I sincerely wish them well. This is followed by a series of much poorer Latinos who move into their old house. None of them stay there for very long, and I think that some of this may be the landlord's fault. Some of them are very good people. We even give one guy who is renting a room in the basement 2 broken down cars. This man was able to rebuild a single functioning vehicle since I made the decision that I would never swap the parts that I had originally intended to do, and is now able to travel outside of town for work. So that guy, in particular, is just a good person. But wait, everything changed when Alpha Bird moved in and he lived there for a long time. Alpha Bird's arrogance originated from his awful history. Born in a wealthy background, he grew up in an atmosphere where power and control were linked with respect. His father, a brutal businessman, developed in him feelings of entitlement and superiority. As a youngster, Alpha rarely faced consequences for his actions, and his family's influence frequently protected him from accountability. Alpha's life took a turn in his early 20s when his father's firm went bankrupt as a result of fraudulent business practices. The once powerful family was abandoned, and Alpha was forced to care for himself. This fall from grace encouraged a strong sense of rage and bitterness against the world. Moving to this neighborhood was meant to be a new beginning, but old habits die hard. His arrogance was a front for his fears, and his violent behavior was his attempt to recover the authority he previously held. This poisonous mix transformed him into the neighborhood monster that he became. He claims to be the emperor of the street where we live since he owns the home, which makes him somebody. Some friends think he is entitled to this status, so he flaunts his wealth and good clothing. Eventually, anyone who questions his authority will regret the day, and trust me, you don't want to do that. He and his family begin to cause us problems because they park in our driveway or in front of our mailbox, which prevents the postman from delivering mail. My lovely wife will drop the kids off at school or take them home, only to discover that she has to park on the street when she gets home, which annoys her a bunch because technically it's our house, and it's our right to park in our driveway, not our neighbors. This situation is driving her crazy, but leaving angry notes on the windshield isn't helping at all. If they see an opening in the street, they take it without hesitation. Weekends are a special kind of nightmare. Not only is the entire street clogged with cars from this house, but the bonfires and loud shouting carry on all night. The noise is so intense that our windows rattle. even the ones at the back of the house. If that wasn't bad enough, it continues until 3, 4, or even 5 in the morning. The guy has intimidated many of the neighbors with his aggressive behavior. They're too scared to call the police with complaints. When we do call, they just make even more noise after the police leave. Yeah, he's a real piece of work. So, one day, my wife comes home after grocery shopping and finds their dog in our yard again. Keep in mind their dog had been in our yard quite a few times previously, but what's different this time is that the dog is digging up our flower beds and ruining the whole look of the garden. My wife parks the car, gets the groceries inside, and then goes out to have a chat with the owner, who's relaxing on his porch. My wife walks up and says, "Excuse me, but your dog is destroying our garden. You need to keep him in your yard." The guy immediately gets defensive and says, "Excuse me, my dog is just having fun. It's not a big deal, so you can calm down." My wife then says, "Your dog is ruining our property. You need to control him, or I'll have to take further action." The guy still doesn't get it and says, "My dog can roam wherever he wants. He's not hurting anyone." At this point, the guy gets up, calls his dog, and goes back into his house, ignoring my wife. My wife then says, "I can call animal control, you know." The guy turns around and says, "You wouldn't dare," and this just shows how little he knows my wife. Not only does she dare, but she's already reported him several times and wanted to give him a chance to fix the problem himself. Well, now he's been warned. But before she calls animal control, my wife has a feeling this might escalate. So she calls the non-emergency police line and lets them know the issue she is having with our neighbor. When they get the address, the operator says, "Oh, it's them." My wife is looking for the number for animal control when there comes a knock at the door. It's none other than Alpha Bird himself, huffing and puffing. My beautiful wife, absolutely fearless, opens the door and confronts him head on. Alpha looks at her and says, "How dare you tell my dog he can't run in your yard? I told him it was fine." My wife replies, "What makes you think that matters? You can't give permission for your dog to trespass on my property." Alpha puffs out his chest a little more, trying to assert his authority. "Listen, lady, you don't know who you're talking to. Whatever I say goes, and if I say it, it happens." At this point, my beautiful wife takes a firm stance, ready to defend herself and blow a soccer kick to Alpha's low-hanging fruit, if you know what I mean, since his attitude intensifies. She can sense the tension in the air. He's about to escalate things beyond just words, but she notices something he can't see. A police car just pulled up behind his dog, lights flashing and sirens silent. My wife soon thinks it would be better to play the victim rather than take the initiative while Alpha lifts his hand in preparation to deliver a threat. She steps back a little, trembling somewhat and pretending to cry while trying not to laugh at how ridiculous the whole thing is. Although Alpha's bravado makes her heart race, it also makes her want to giggle. He never lands the blow, much to her pleasure. Officer Friendly, who's always been a supportive presence in the neighborhood, seems to sense the conflict. The moment he spots Alpha's fist rising, he moves at lightning speed. In a matter of seconds, he closes the distance, grabbing Alpha's fist just before it can swing toward my wife. "Hey, what's going on here?" he demands, his authoritative voice cutting through the tension. Alpha's bravado immediately went to zero as he stared in shock at the officer, was caught off guard, and was left speechless. Not long after the incident, Alpha Bird finds himself in a tough spot. He's wearing shiny silver bracelets and sitting in the back of a police cruiser. More police officers arrive at the scene, and my beautiful wife plays the perfect victim. She talks about how scared she is of what Alpha could do to her and the kids while she's home alone, with her husband away for work. She believes her performance deserves an Oscar, and while I'm not entirely convinced, it impresses everyone around. We decided to sue Alpha right after this incident. Alpha's niece, who also lived with him, was told to move her dog off our property, and after that day, we didn't see Alpha around for almost a week. It seems complicated issues are going on for him, but the police can't share the details, and honestly, we don't care. We just enjoy the quiet. Finally, came the day of the trial. Our lawyer was a sharp-witted attorney with a history of destroying even the most strong opponents. She carefully gathered evidence, including images of the damage to our yard, surveillance footage of Alpha's dog running wild, and witness testimony from our neighbors. The pièce de résistance was the police report capturing Alpha's attempted attack on my wife. On trial day, the courtroom was full of expectations. Alpha Bird, dressed in an ill-fitting suit, walked in with the same arrogance he had shown in the neighborhood. He was working with a high-priced attorney known for his strong defense tactics, but our lawyer was rather unbothered. The defense responded with a poor case, seeking to dismiss Alpha's acts as misunderstandings. Alpha's lawyer's efforts to destroy the evidence were greeted with objections and dismissals. As the trial continued, it became obvious that the weight of the evidence was in our favor. Witness after witness described Alpha's disruptive behavior. My wife's passionate story of the near assault created observable tension in the courtroom. The judge, a tough but fair guy, listened carefully. The jury thought about it for what seemed like an age before returning with a finding of guilty on all charges. The judge issued a large fine and a prison term. Alpha Bird was sentenced to 6 months in jail for his violent behavior and was required to pay a large fine to compensate for damages and legal expenses. As Alpha was brought away in handcuffs, the courtroom hummed with relief and joy. Justice had been served, and the Maplewood community sighed a collective sigh of relief. Alpha Bird's reign of terror was over, and we could finally resume our calm suburban life existence. The victory was not only ours, but that of the entire community, and it highlighted the importance of standing up to bullying and arrogance. Alpha was released 6 months later, and for the rest of the time he lives across the street. He completely ignores us. He also makes sure that none of his family's dogs ever run into our yard again, which is a huge relief. The only downside is that we still have to deal with loud music on Friday nights. It was annoying, especially when we wanted to relax. But after that first visit from the police, the music stops for good. It's amazing how quickly things can change when someone takes action. While Alpha owns the house, it isn't well taken care of. We notice the paint peeling and the yard becoming overgrown. Eventually, the place falls into disrepair. I suspect he ends up selling it, probably to buy another house just to let it run down again. It's like he's not interested in making anything better, he just wants to make a mess. In the end, I'm proud of my wife. She stood her ground and handled the situation with strength and grace. I hope we never have to deal with these neighbors again. What a crazy story. Alpha thought he could scare us over a dog, trying to show his power. It's just not fair because he was completely in the wrong. His niece should have moved her dog right away. Who is he to decide who can and cannot use our yard? After all that, we finally have some peace. The neighborhood feels calmer without Alpha and the noise he made. It's nice to enjoy our home without worry, and we can finally relax knowing that our yard is ours again. We can even let our kids play outside without fear of any confrontation. It's a relief to have that sense of safety restored, and we're thankful for how things turned out. He was annoying, so hopefully, his time in prison taught him a lesson about the hopelessness of trying to intimidate or hit others to achieve what you want. The only thing that will ever come of it is you getting caught.